Hello, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Devin Desjarlais. I am head of marketing and storytelling for United Way of the Greater Triangle. Our mission is to eradicate poverty and increase social mobility through the power of partnerships. That partnership piece is key. We're talking partners, not just our for-profit partners, our donors, the people who help fund the work and make this possible, but our nonprofit partners, the folks who are on the ground doing the work needed to eradicate poverty and increase social mobility. Today, we're talking with Dr. Will Jackson, Chief Dreamer at Village of Wisdom, which is a Durham-based organization that supports families organizing and family organizing and advocacy entities working to eliminate racial injustice in schools. We'll also hear from Aya Shabu, who is Village of Wisdom's facilitation guru, who's also going to share her personal story with you as a parent with a child in the school system, as a staff member of Village of Wisdom. And this looks a little bit different than what you guys would normally expect out of campaign season. Normally, we'd all be sitting in a room. You guys would get to meet Will and Aya face to face. You'd get to shake their hands. You'd get to spend some time with them. In the spirit of keeping everybody safe and healthy, we're hoping that this is a good alternative and really gives you the chance to get to know this work firsthand. So I'd love to introduce Will. Will, do you want to come off mute and just introduce yourself a little bit?
Yeah, hey, I'm excited to talk to everybody today. My name is William Jackson. I am a former educator. Spent some time teaching science down in Atlanta and also in Virginia, and decided to leave the classroom to really understand like how kids learn and really deepen my understanding of that. And that journey led me to Village of Wisdom. Also try my best to be a good partner to my wife and a good father to my daughter, who apparently is very detail oriented, which is super strange for me because I am not. But this little girl does not miss anything, and she's 3.5, so she's the joy of our lives right now, and that's me, I think.
Thank you. And Aya, we'd love it if you wanted to introduce yourself now. We'll come back to your story in a couple of minutes, but just to give people an idea of you and who you are.
Yes, thank you, Devin. So I am Aya Shabu, and first and foremost, I'm a writer and a dancer, and then a mother. Came to Durham back in 2013. No, it's a lie, 2003. Time is flying. And I was a dancer for Chuck Davis in the African American Dance Ensemble. And through that work, just fell in love with Durham and continued to do cultural curation for my community, organizing Kwanzaa events for the Haiti Heritage Center. Started a walking tour business out of my own curiosity about Durham's history. Started Whistle Stop Tours, which is a performance based walking company that helps to preserve and tell the stories of African American communities in Durham. And then just as a homeschooling mother and believing in alternative education, helped to found Empowered Minds Academy, which is a private school based on the Acton Academy model. And so all of these experiences around culture and education, it made sense that I would land at a place like Village of Wisdom.
Absolutely. Thank you. They say that one person can't do everything, but you both are really making me believe that that's not true. With your backgrounds are incredible and inspiring. So thank you for introducing yourself and sharing more. So we'll kick off with question one, just so everybody's aware. If this is your first time joining an Unwrapped series, we're going to go through a series of questions, give you guys a real deep dive look into the work that Will and Aya do at Village of Wisdom. And then we'll have a Q&A portion at the end. So if you have any burning questions that come up for you during this conversation, please share them in the chat function. We'll be reviewing those, and then we'll actually ask them at the end. So feel free to drop them in there as you're thinking about them. If you're like me and you don't write it down, you'll lose it. So I totally get it there. So question number one, Will, tell us a little bit more about Village of Wisdom and its mission.
Yeah, so our mission is to protect Black genius. And what we mean by that is really protecting the intellectual curiosity of Black children and their racial identity. So how they think about their Blackness and just their desire to want to learn. And so we are really vigilant about protecting Black genius. And the way that we get to this is by actually creating more culturally affirming learning environments or culturally responsive learning environments. And when I say culturally responsive or culturally affirming, I mean environments that make Black children feel good about being Black. What we frequently see is that Black children are trapped in educational and school environments that do not make them feel good about being Black, that kind of ignore their contributions to history, especially in the intellectual realm, and also pretty much tell them that anything about their culture is not welcome in the classroom. And that is really a problem because learning is based on connecting new information and prior knowledge. And so if we deny a child their culture, then they can't bring the prior knowledge that they need to bring to the classroom to actually connect it to the new information to complete that learning cycle. So again, our mission is to kind of create these culturally affirming learning environments. And most recently, like the ways that we've been going about doing that is actually translating the wisdom of Black parents into culturally affirming learning strategies. So who better to help us identify what it means to be culturally responsive or culturally affirming than the parents of the children who basically shepherd them into their culture, right? Like our parents are the people who kind of expose us to our traditions, our practices, the things that we do. And so they're really good reflections of the culture that kids feel comfortable in. And so, you know, that's why we're called Village of Wisdom. Is like literally we're taking the wisdom of Black parents and trying to make it into strategies that teachers, educators, and other parents themselves can use. So again, that we can do this, our ultimate mission, which is protecting the intellectual curiosity and the racial identity of Black children.
Amazing. Thank you. You know, and I know I've told you this before, but when you and I, when you and I met a year ago, I was blown away by the work that you guys are doing and the intentionality behind it. You know, and one of the things, you know, I think we're all witnessing and experiencing as Americans is that, you know, equity, injustice, racism is, you know, at the forefront of everybody's mind right now. And it has been previously, and it will be in the future. And when people think about that work, they think about what they're seeing on TV, and they think about what they might be seeing in movies or reading in books. But it's that everyday practice of racial injustice that people don't often see or understand unless they're experiencing it. And so I wanted to find out, you know, what's something that the average resident in the Triangle doesn't know about racial injustice in education, and what's unique to Village of Wisdom's approach to solving for it?
That's a good question. You know, so Devin asked me if I had any slides that I wanted to send her, and I should have sent her this slide. But I just want y'all for a second to answer your question, Devin, about, you know, how folks might not necessarily be thinking about racial injustice inside of schools. I want you just to kind of envision like a lake real quick, right? And as you walk up to this lake, and what you notice about the lake is that all of the fish are kind of floating belly up at the top of the lake. And, you know, if you got a 3-year-old like mine, she probably would say the fish are dead, the fish are dead, the fish are dead. And so what I want you to think about as you think about this analogy is, why are the fish dead? Because basically all the fish in this lake are dead, right? And if you're tracking, most likely you're like, well, there's probably something wrong with the water. And that's what's happening inside of our schools, right? Like the fish are Black and brown students in particular. Like, you know, we pay particular attention in our organization to Black students. But I mean, it's happened to most students of color. And the reality is that the environment inside of our schools is killing their intellectual curiosity. It is killing their sense of self. And we don't talk about that racial injustice when we talk about like things like the achievement gap, right? And I know this because and this is the big thing we talk about inside of our organization, we spend so much time measuring and fixing fish instead of cleaning the water. And so what's an example of measuring the fish? Well, I can go and pull the race of the students who have been suspended from a school and the race of the students who are suspended from the whole school system. But what I can't find is the races of the teachers who do the suspending inside of the school. We measure the race of the students inside of the school. We know what the racial like population is inside of a school, but you can't tell me what the racial population of the teachers inside of that school. You can't tell me the racial population of the principals in that school. You can't tell me the racial population of the people who control the quality of the water in the school. And I think so that kind of gives you a sense of like what we're not measuring, right? Like we don't even have good measures for racial injustice because we spend all of our time measuring students and not the water that they're in. And so literally we came up with a measure to measure water where we actually asked students, tell us whether or not you're in a culturally affirming learning environment or not. Right. And so we went through all of the research and the rigorous psychometrics and all this other stuff just to be able to say that like we have a research validated measure that allows us to evaluate whether or not a child is in a culturally affirming and learning environment. Because a lot of times people they don't know what that means because we are so preoccupied with measuring fish and trying to fix fish. So a lot of programs you'll see were like, oh, well, we'll guarantee that less Black students are being suspended. But I'm always critical of that because unless you're talking to the teachers, you're talking to the wrong people because Black children are disproportionately suspended for the same activities as white kids. So that's not a fish problem, that's a water problem, if folks are tracking. And the other thing that I think, people probably don't even think about or notice is I remember, walking into a classroom one day, and this will be the last story and I'll shut up. But like, I walked into the classroom and I saw on the wall, it was like, all the great math contributors in the world, dating back to like, 1000 or something like that, right? And as I looked up on the wall, it was nothing but white guys, right? And so now, and this was in a school that was 50% Black and 50% Latinx. So now I walk into your classroom to do math, and basically what you're telling me is that my people have had no intellectual contribution to this particular topic. Why am I listening to you? Why do I care? Because evidently I can't do this stuff because my people have nothing to give to it, right? And so we don't talk about, again, how we murder the intellectual curiosity of Black children inside of classrooms and how that contributes to the achievement gap. And we definitely don't have enough support given to teachers and school leaders and people like that to create and to further investigate the intellectual contributions of people of color. And it's largely because it's the American experiment in many ways has been an experiment in trying to elevate white men to such a high status that nobody else has the ability to find their identity. And that's really critical when you're trying to do a task that takes a lot of mental capacity, and learning is a task that takes a lot of mental capacity. So what you're asking me to do as a Black child is to cope with the reality that you're saying I don't belong here. So that moves my attention away from this. And then it makes me, and so that means that the limited attention I have, I can't focus on what I need to learn because you told me I don't belong here, right? But other kids, right, and this is where the racial injustice happens. If I'm a white guy, well, I'm not worried about that, right? So I'm not using my limited mental attention to pay attention to the fact that I don't belong here. I get to use my mental attention to focus on the math problems. And so when I talk about racial injustice in a learning space, that is a very cognitive process. And that's a way that I don't think we often think about how racial injustice directly interrupts the very mechanism of learning for Black children.
This is a bit of an aside question that I'm going to throw at you really quickly, but I think it's relevant to the conversation. I have some friends in the education space who are confronting their own unintentional biases that now that they're learning more about things like what you just described, they're addressing how they approach educating Black and brown students in their classroom, trying to incorporate some of the learning materials that you're talking about and create a more culturally affirming environment. Are there a couple of things that teachers could do now to start on that journey, even just in the virtual learning space?
Yeah, I mean, one thing that we've created and that you can get on our site right now is the Black Genius planning process. And it's not a tool for a teacher to fill out, but it is a tool for you to encourage your students and their parents to fill out. And what it'll do is it'll give them an opportunity to reflect on who the child is, and then they can share that information with you. And this is how we become culturally responsive, right? Because you have to know the culture of the kids that are in your classroom. And so we need more tools that help facilitate teacher understanding of who children are and what the identity of those children are and what culture they're bringing to the classroom. Because if we don't have good tools for that, then how can we expect teachers to incorporate the child's culture into the instruction that they're doing? So that's one of the tools I would kind of point out. I also think that, Rhonda Taylor Bullock talks a lot about the use of literature for both young and old children to introduce the intellectual contributions of Black people and other people of color. And so there's a lot of books that do a good job of this. And then I think, some of it is, I won't call it simple Googling, but Googling with, some critical, digital criticism about the intellectual contributions of Black and brown people to the particular area that you're talking about. And sometimes you got to dig a little deep on that, and you need to be wary of what you're reading. But there's Black people who contributed to math. Like there are Black people who contributed to science. There are Black people who contributed to all of these areas. A lot of times we just don't spend the energy to find them and lift them up. And I think that means a lot for kids. And the last thing I'll say is that, when we know a child's interest, the simple act of even playing to that interest just a bit, lets that child know that you see them. And a lot of times, teachers will retort, well, I can't do that for all of my kids. Well, I mean, the question is, are you doing it for any of your kids right now? First of all, and if you aren't doing it for any of your kids, then, how are any of them learning? But second of all is nobody's saying you got to do that for every kid every day. Take a little bit at a time, and you would be surprised how just one mention, just one notion of oh, this person knows who I am, right? And they're willing to kind of take a little bit of time out of the school day to day to recognize my particular interest. And you would be surprised how far that goes with students and parents.
Thank you so much. For anybody who does not yet have the URL to Village of Wisdom's website, if you do want to check out some of those materials and start diving into the work that they're doing after this, it's villageofwisdom.org. I just wanted to name that really quickly. I'd love to pivot to Aya really quickly and hear her story. This is kind of a fun exercise for me too. Normally when we go into these, I have a good idea of the story that somebody's going to tell. And this is new to me too. So Aya, I'd love it if you would take it away.
Thank you. When I moved to East Durham, the Albright neighborhood, I heard about Village of Wisdom, and it was a new neighborhood for us. And it was a neighborhood that had seen significant divestment. And so I knew that my children, I have a boy and a girl, and my son's now 15, my daughter's 10. But this was about 4 years ago. And I knew that they needed aunties and uncles around them. They needed friends. And I know I needed a network of parents that would be a support to me, and were like-minded in the sense that I wanted to affirm my children and affirm their Blackness in particular. So through history and culture, celebrations and life traditions. And I didn't necessarily want to focus on whiteness, because oftentimes those two get pitted against each other. And I wanted really just a community that I could do that with. And so I reached out to Village of Wisdom. And this speaks to a core value that Village of Wisdom has, which is around continual growth as an organization. Another value that Village of Wisdom has is also around trusting the wisdom of its ancestors and Black parents and community. And so I first was introduced to Village of Wisdom as a parent. And I remember talking to Will on the phone and letting him know all the things that I needed Village of Wisdom to do for me and my family. And I really believe that that's why I got hired, because here I was, a parent, saying, I need you to do this better. And I think Village of Wisdom is constantly in response to the parents, Black parents in the community, and really does, grapple with the needs of parents. And so here I am now on staff, I think in large part because I spoke up and I demanded as much from the promise that VOW, that's our acronym, makes around protecting Black genius. So there's a piece about, myself that I kind of took for granted. So my husband and I were both performing cultural artists. We're dancers, and we do a lot of cultural affirmation through teaching West African dance and visual art forms. And what was happening at home is that, outside the home, we were presenting this wonderful culture and knowledge to audiences. And what we were doing at home was analyzing white supremacy. And so what my kids were getting was getting this message that that race and Blackness in particular was fraught with danger, was fraught with violence, because we weren't doing enough to actually affirm their Blackness. And what I love about the work that VOW does, a lot of people are first introduced to Village of Wisdom through its brand, Black Genius. And so this brand is on t-shirts, in my profile picture that you had up, I'm wearing a Black Genius, and Will's infant daughter at the time is wearing a onesie that says Black Genius, right? And this wearable affirmation is brilliant, right? I mean, we saw like this merger of fashion, which is a part of Black culture for sure, and this affirmation that we are intellectual beings, that we have the capacity and we have the desire for achievement and learning. And so when my children, wear these t-shirts, right? One, they're being affirmed by people other than their mother, right? So they don't listen to me anyway. So we've got a whole organization that is affirming who they are. And that every time they see someone else in the community wearing that shirt, that person is also affirming their genius, and they're doing the same for them. And so now Black genius is cool. Like, they believe it. And to be Black and to be in pursuit of your own intellectual curiosity is a given for them. And it's a cool thing to do. And so I've seen that in my own family. In particular, the Black profile has been super useful in our family. So the Black Genius profile includes a framework of these elements, and there are at least 6, right? And it comes out of Will's research when he was at UNC. And, interest awareness, which Will has spoken to, racial pride, multicultural navigation, selective trust, social justice. I'm missing one, but many of them I already was doing, especially around interest awareness as a homeschooling parent. I had the opportunity to, follow my children around, see what they were interested in. But there was a piece that I actually struggled with, and that was really around selective trust. And Will really broke it down and helped me understand that, if you can't trust someone, then you can't love. And if you can't love, you can't create. And I had this beautiful young boy who was wildly creative, but had a lot of social anxiety. And so because of that social anxiety, he didn't trust other people. And he also oftentimes didn't even trust himself. And when I began to realize that what he needed more than anything else, more than, a world-class education, was really just this sense of, I am held by my family, I am held by my community, and also I know best. And so we started really allowing him and following his no. So when he said no to things, even though we wanted him to participate in certain activities, we really had to let him know that his no really meant something. And he began to really thrive as he began to trust himself more and more. And so, you know, his first year in public high school, which was his choice, so that was another trust. I allowed him to go to public high school because before that, he had been in a small private school that we had helped to found called Empowered Minds Academy. And he went to public high school, and the first semester was, you know, a flop. Well, it wasn't a flop, it was a learning opportunity, but certainly the grades did not reflect someone who seemed to be in pursuit of their education. And so he figured it out. It took him a while, but he figured it out. And part of that figuring it out was me having learned in our family learning villages, which was a program that we offered to help train Black parents on, one, just kind of helping them see structural racism, number one, and two, guiding them through these Black genius elements. I brought that profile with me into every conversation I had with all of his teachers. I made sure that they knew who my son was before the first day of school. I wanted them to know his interests. I wanted them to know what his goals were. And so that really helped to reframe all of our conversations about DeLacy, even when he was failing, because it wasn't about their systems and their structures and the curriculum, but it was about DeLacy. And through that process, you know, now I have a sophomore who's, you know, this currently has all A's, and most surprisingly, like, he's tutoring other children in classes. This is not someone who would have done that before, did not feel that confident, did not feel that sense of self-worth and pride, and now does. And I think it's a host of the Black Genius brand, and just us really leaning into this idea of racial pride at home, and also, you know, really just helping him to develop that sense of trust.
That was beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. Not just from the angle of being a parent, but also, you know, as you know, a staff member, a team member of Village of Wisdom. You know, as a parent myself, I so admire and appreciate the intentionality that you're putting towards making sure that your son is set up for success, that he sees that he's valued, that he can excel beyond his wildest dreams because he's got a safe place to land, because you've created that for him. And I think that's really incredible. And the other thing that I want to touch on really quickly that your experience really embodies is something we talk about a lot, and that's change needs to happen from within communities out. We're always going to have better solutions when we're looking to the people inside the communities experiencing the challenges. And that's really, you know, what you did. You went to Village of Wisdom, you sought out their support, and you then became a member of the team. And so kudos to you guys for really rallying around each other, so to speak, as a community in Durham. Will, I want to pivot to you again really quickly. You know, we mentioned at the start of this that normally you guys would actually probably be in a room with all these people, you know, and you get to meet them face to face and, you know, shake hands and hug and all that jazz. You know, what does your work look like now that there are social distancing guidelines in place for the foreseeable future? Oh, you're on mute.
Yeah, sorry. Let me just first say thank you, Aya. That was dope. I almost teared up over here. You know, caught me off guard a little bit. Gotta get you in here more often. Anyway, so what this year has looked like is trusting our team. Really, like when COVID hit, one of our team members was like, you know, don't allow us, Will, to become Blockbuster when Netflix came around. And I remember talking to Aaron, our team member, about this, and I was like, you're right, Aaron. And so I came back to the full team and I was like, hey, y'all, we can't be Blockbuster. Like, the world has changed, and it will probably be changed for forever, and definitely in this very acute way for a good amount of time. And so, we really started to think about like, I think the first thing that guided our approach, right, to like what our work looks like now is what we wanted education to look like, period. Right? Like that hasn't always been our work. We had to make a pivot away from we were in the fish fixing business initially as well. Because what we were saying to parents like Aya was like, okay, well, just affirm your child so they can deal with the racial bias that they would feel in schools, right? And so we had to make this transition point to like, no, we're going to change what schools look like. And we started to ask our parents, what do you want to see? What is your dream? What would it mean for your child to experience learning in such a way that they felt the best about being Black that they ever felt? What would it mean for your child to be in a classroom and to feel the best about like their academic journey that they've ever felt, right? And so we started to ask parents that dream. And once you start asking parents to dream like that, you can't stop, right? And so what we said is like, this is going to be a transformational moment in our nation's history, in our world's history. And so what we need to be preoccupied with is what is it that we want to do to be able to create the type of learning environments that we know that our Black children deserve. And that's all I knew, because I'm the dreamer guy. I don't come up with good ideas. I just say stuff. And then people are like, okay, well, what does that mean, Will? And that is probably the prime frustration of working with me. But then brilliantly, Taylor from our team said, well, I can't reach the parents directly. So what I'm going to do is, she proposed to the team doing a series of events called Wisdom Wednesdays, where basically for 6 Wednesdays in a row, she went through every one of the Black Genius elements, one per week. And so she invited a group of parents together, and they came every week, and they would talk about interest awareness, not just of their children, but of their own interests, and how like they were kind of coping with the COVID reality, because this is like while school was still in. And I was like, man, that was really dope. After it was over with, I went to a couple of the Wisdom Wednesdays. Madupe, my wife, was there. Folks really enjoyed it and they loved it. And then one of the other staff members was like, well, we need to figure out a way so that Black parents can actually validate the types of culturally affirming experiences that their kids are having. Like, who better to say that an experience of learning was culturally affirming than a Black parent? Like, who is a better judge of that, right? And so she was like, what I want to do is put a clearinghouse together that allows for Black parents to validate culturally affirming strategies. One, because there really isn't too many clearinghouses. I think there's like one clearinghouse right now that has some focus on culturally affirming or culturally responsive strategies. But 2, because like we wanted parents to be, again, a part of translating that wisdom. And so like taking those 2 ideas, I was like, well, what happens if we actually, and this is what we're doing now, we have taken parents who've experienced that Wisdom Wednesday and have a deep knowledge of the Black Genius framework. And now we've taken them through a process where we train them on research strategies. So we're doing Zoom meetings with like 5 parents, and basically they're our participant researchers, and they're actually leading parents, students, and teachers through a series of focus groups to ask them that very question. What would a learning environment in an at-home or online space look like that would make Black kids feel the best that they've ever felt, that would make them feel the best about school that they would ever feel? And then those parents are going to make meaning of that data, and they're going to tell us like, okay, these are the strategies that we would like to come up with. These are our findings. And then because Aya is the plug in the Black homeschooling community, she's bringing a lot of expertise from that community, and they're going to help us think about like, okay, well, what strategies would best support parents during this time? What strategies would best support teachers during this time? And then we're going to test it out, right? Like we're going to test it out and see what works. And at the end of this, the Black parents will be then trained again to kind of do evaluation. And guess what? They'll be the ones who validated the strategies that showed the most promise, right? And that'll be the intro to our clearinghouse product. And to sweeten the whole deal, in her spare time, Aya and Taylor have like developed this really dope video that's going to come out. That's that is another extension of this positive Black affirmation that's reminding kids about our mindfulness practices, that's reminding Black kids about the intellectual contributors to in our own like Raleigh Triangle, like Durham area. And that's going to kind of kick off all of this stuff publicly to people. So what we're trying to do is put all of what we've been doing into a digital environment, but also what we've actually become is more strategic over this time, and how we pursue our goals. And that is largely due to folks like Aya and Taylor on our team who have been pushing us to center Black parents since they've gotten on the team, because that's what we said we would do. And so they've just been holding me to it.
I've been so impressed to see how our nonprofit partners have adapted despite all of the challenges that come with the pandemic. And that answer is really testament to that. The fact that you guys have not only been able to continue your work, but have been able to improve on it in a very strategic manner, in a way that still supports the students, still supports the parents, is incredible. And this really, it leads well into the next question I have for you. You know, one of our campaign this year, so when our workplace donors invest in our community impact fund, they're supporting the stabilization and recovery of the Triangle following this pandemic. The pandemic is showing us the disparities that exist in our society. It's not only identifying it, but it's widening it. And so I'm hoping you can tell us a little bit about how you envision Village of Wisdom playing a role in strengthening the Triangle, in the future and following the pandemic. And if you could also tell us why funds from United Way donors are important for that.
How about this, Devin? How about I take the second part of that conversation, that question, and I'm curious if you have, what do you want to see for Black kids as a Black parent? And then I'll answer the second part. Does that work?
Yeah, it works for me.
Yeah, so we talk a lot about that Black liberation is inevitable. I mean, and that's it. I was thinking about Will's earlier comment when he was in that classroom and, half the school was Black, half the school was Latinx. And on the wall were these, dead white mathematicians, and there was no evidence of the intellectual contribution of Black or Latinx folks. And not only does that make kids not want to learn, it makes Blackness a problem. It makes folks question, why would I want to be Black, right? If we have this racialized history that's fraught with violence, and then even in the present, I'm not anywhere here making a contribution. What we're then saying is go to school to be something other than who you are. So for sure, it is around, this idea of self-knowledge, self-love, and Black liberation. And I think it really can start in the education space. That's what I would like. That's what I want for my kids. And I don't know what that is because I have never experienced it, right? And so I believe if we continue to help our children feel the best that they can feel about who they are as Black people, right? All children love to learn. Like you can put any infant on the ground and they're going to get into everything. So that's not even a question. We've been actually suppressing our children from learning. We've been putting, these shackles on them, telling them what they can't do. One of the things that I'm most challenged by, as I would love to see in the immediate future, is us, especially as we're looking into racial equity, is really transform even our language. So we say things like, I'm discriminated against because I'm Black. That makes Blackness a problem, and that puts an additional burden on people who are actually the victims. And I would like us to really begin to acknowledge that Black folks are discriminated against because of white supremacy, and then really start putting the onus back where it belongs. I think that would go a long way, even in just that little linguistic change, because we have young ears listening to our language all the time. And I realized that as a parent, I was constantly criticizing, and analyzing whiteness in my home. But what my kids were not hearing was the celebration of Black culture and Black people. So yeah, shifting the narrative, even in the most simplest and minute ways.
Thank you.
That was the best decision I made today, is not answering that question. Good gracious. What so how does this connect, right? So when you think about, okay, how does money help us accomplish this? One is that these participant parent researchers who are helping us, we're giving basically $2,000 stipends, right? And that's $2,000 stipends for them to help us translate the wisdom of other Black parents like them into culturally affirming learning strategies. But that's also $2,000 to basically all of them is 5 Black women, a couple of them mothers who are leading their households by themselves, right? And I'm sure that is helping their kind of economic impact, right? So because the thing is that at Village of Wisdom, like, we are who we serve, right? So when you're making investments in us, just know, like, one of my main goals is to recycle. Like, if the dollar don't get recycled nowhere else, it's gonna get recycled inside the Village of Wisdom, right? Like, and we're gonna take care of our people. You know what I mean? And I remember one time talking to a funder, and we were telling them, like, we were really proud. We were like, we give parents $250 to come to our 2-day training on FLVs, and they were like, why would you give them $250? Doesn't that make them dependent on you? And I was just so baffled by this idea, because what I would love, one, for this environment to look like, is I would love for us to really examine and understand how much we have devalued Black parents. And what I would love for people to do is to see Black parents through my eyes. And I would love for them to see that an investment in a Black parent is basically the investment in the end product. Is you get somebody like me, you get somebody like Aya, you get somebody like her children, like the message she sent out, earlier this week, talking about her child and all the A's that he got, and the Bitmoji that he shared of him dropping the mic over the top of his grades. Like, when you invest in Black parents, that's what you invest in. You invest in a Black mom telling a 5-year-old boy that Dr. Charles Drew was a Black man who created the ability to make blood transfusions. That you invest in a Black mom who told that same son that George Washington Carver was one of the greatest agriculturalists to ever live. You invest in that Black boy believing that all scientists were Black before he even found out that white people involve themselves in science. You invest in a man who became the leader of an organization whose sole job is to protect Black genius. That's what you invest in, right? And I told y'all the strategy, so you know where the money is going. But I just want to paint the picture that if we believe in Black parents, because I have never met a Black parent that didn't want the best for their child. We've been doing focus groups all week with a whole bunch of Black parents, and we asked them, what do you want for your Black child? Well, I want them to know that there are no barriers to their advancement. I want them to know that they can accomplish whatever it is that they want to accomplish. I want them to know that they can be whoever it is that they want to be. And so what this investment means is that it means that you're investing in us literally creating culturally affirming learning environments so that children have the opportunity to become the best that they can be.
I'm emotional. That was incredible. And you said it perfectly. We have one more question and before we get to Q&A, but one thing I want to share that, I'm going to steal Eric's line here. Eric is our president and CEO, but we talk about often is you can't be anti-poverty without also being anti-racist. And the two go hand in hand. By investing in Black parents, by investing in Village of Wisdom, through United Way or through designated giving directly to Village of Wisdom, you are investing in a stronger triangle. You're investing in a future where our community is a place where everybody has the ability to thrive. And I just think that is the most beautiful dream that I've ever heard of. And you guys are really putting that into action right now. And I think I just want to applaud you guys for that work. Last question before we get to Q&A, what can people do to decrease the amount of racial inequity that exists in the world? What can they do that'll help move the needle in creating a more racially equitable space?
I tell people all the time, like, this is a battle we're fighting within ourselves. The more time we can spend examining our own actions, the more time we can examine our own mentalities and the bad things that we've learned, the closer we get to solving this problem, right? And so we have to all admit, first of all, that we're all on a journey, that we have all learned white supremacy. We have all learned bad ideas about sexism, racism, ableism. And the sooner you find out that you're on a journey, the farther you get in your lifetime, right? And the farther that we get as a collective village in our lifetime to this idea of liberation for all people. And so that means being honest with yourself about, like, how have you participated in racism previously, right? And if you're Black, like, you don't benefit from that. Like, it's just basically at that point, it's just self-hate or whatever. But like, all of us have in some way benefited this system, right? Many times, because that's what we're taught. And so we really have to kind of be students and learn and examine our ideas. Like, even like, you know, Eric kind of talks about this, like you said, all the time, like, poverty is a race problem. And so then when we see violence inside of our community, especially here in Durham, people are like, well, we need to do these violence prevention programs. And that's right? Like, yes, we need violence prevention programs. But the reason why folks are shooting each other is because they don't have access to resources, right? They don't have jobs, right? And so, and they don't have access, a meaningful, like, pathway to get to a job. So what do you do as opposed to that? You try to make your own ways to make money, right? And so, but what we have to stop doing is seeing, again, the fish that are dead and not the water that is creating them being dead, right? And so we have to start asking ourselves the question of, how do we clean this water? Not how do we fix these dead fish? Because the fish didn't get like that because they wanted to be like that. They got like that because they were swimming in poison water.
Thank you. So I just want to point out, you know, I've been tracking the chat box during all of this, and this is the first of these Unwrapped series we've had in which you guys have used this area to applaud each other and to support each other and to embrace each other. And it's been incredible to watch. And so I apologize if anybody dropped questions in there that they want answered by either Will or Aya. But if you do have any questions, please drop it in now. I'm keeping an eye on it. We've got 10 minutes reserved for that. And if nobody has questions, you know, I've got a surprise one that I can throw out there, but I'll leave it up to you guys first.
Yeah, this is Eric. I have a question for Aya and Will. Good to see y'all. Thanks for doing this. How are you all thinking about growth, not only for Village of Wisdom, but for the work that you're doing, and so that more kids, more families can benefit from the work that you're doing?
Well, one of the projects that Will spoke to is our Black to School video. You know, we're in a time now where I don't think we'll ever go back. You know, the blessing of COVID has pushed us all to really think about a global community and leveraging these social media platforms to be able to reach really anyone on the globe. So I imagine now for a lot of artists who've had to, you know, figure out this platform, you know, even when they can go back to live performances, they will still always, you know, utilize the technology of live streaming. So we've just kind of opened up our audience, and certainly our Black to School video that will drop later this month is not just, you know, designed for Black kids in Durham. You know, we can reach every Black child who needs to hear the message that you are a Black genius.
Yeah, I mean, so, and Eric, I think the thing that we're thinking about with our impact is like doing a better job of telling our story, right? So helping people understand how this affirmation video is very much connected to this digital care package that we're going to create for Black parents. And it's very much connected to the instructional toolkit that we create for teachers. But also by us digitizing those toolkits and thinking from a user-centered framework, when we create them, that is going to encourage more people to use it, right? So the idea is like, how do we actually connect and get people to be aware of the work that we're doing, and introduce this idea that we talk a lot about in order to get to culturally affirming learning environments, is that we want Black parents to have more power over essential education decisions. And one of the ways that we can do that is by training a whole bunch of Black parents on Black Genius Framework, right? So they have a framework to work from. But then two, also training them on research and evaluation methods so that they can use that framework to evaluate the quality of instruction that their children are getting inside of the classroom. And then we can elevate those strategies that are working best in particular contexts through a clearinghouse. So now you have people all across the country, all across the triangle, looking at this clearinghouse for options and activities to use inside of their classroom that will be more culturally responsive to children. And so, you know, that kind of gives you an arc, but you need a communication strategy and plan and all that other stuff to make sure that folks notice that stuff. But it also kind of allows us to, you can kind of basically rinse and repeat, train people on Black Genius frameworks, train them on evaluation strategies, and then identify those strategies that work the best, and also kind of help schools think about how they would even think about their parent engagement differently through this kind of model that we're providing. And so that's like what we're thinking about and expanding. I mean, right now, you know, we sit at a budget of about, we brought in a little bit over $1 million this year, and we're hoping over the next 3 or 4 years that we would make it to like $4 to $5 million, right? To be able to hire enough people to do this repeatedly and train people over and over again.
Thanks. Thank you, Aya. Thank you, Will. That's very helpful.
So we've got some questions rolling in right now. So somebody has a question, and I'm just going to go ahead and read it. They said it's an awesome conversation, but they were wondering if you can address how the Black community has unwittingly participated in tainting the water, so to speak, by perpetuating the systems that might undermine the Black genius of the children. Do you have thoughts on that?
I mean, oh, go ahead, Will.
No, go ahead.
Well, I was just thinking about my own upbringing. You know, my family's from Barbados. But even still being here in the US, you know, the two opportunities that we had for advancement that were laid before us, right, and certainly championed by the civil rights movement, was education and homeownership, right? And we know the caps on homeownership, right? So we see that every day. So we understand that. And I think we're beginning to recognize through this conversation and other conversations around the cap around education. But one of the things that I've really seen as a blessing during this home learning time, as challenging as it is for many, because I already had a background as a homeschooling parent, for me, this was really like a return to homeschooling with a lot of support. So one of the things that I noticed is that teachers are being, I mean, first of all, hats off to teachers, doing an amazing job to translate to this new platform, right? To engage young people, and sometimes very young people, across this digital media. But they're actually relying on the student to do the majority of the work, which is, I believe personally, the way it really always should have been. And so what we're seeing now is like there's less focus on the teacher, and more focus on giving students the tools that they need to find the information that they need. So with the internet, content is everywhere in our lives, walking around when we're able, like content is everywhere. So this idea of, you know, teachers being the purveyors of this knowledge, I think, you know, we're moving away from that. And I think COVID has helped to move us away from that even more quickly. Reality is that, you know, we're just preparing these young people to inhabit the world that we're creating. Well, I think we need to kind of move out of the way a little bit more quickly and recognize that they can create the world that they are going to inhabit. I think that you just need to have better ways of supporting them, the how as opposed to the what.
Thank you. So I do recognize we have 3 minutes left and that some people will have to hop off. So we've got 3 more questions if you guys are open to it, 2 of which actually can go hand in hand. But Daryl has a question and has unmuted himself to go ahead and ask live.
Well, first, thank you to Brother Will and Sister Aya. And it was good to hear that you all are leveraging some resources. You know, the data still says that organizations run by Black folks are still not getting their share of the giving dollars and the philanthropic dollars. Even as good as, and I hear the work you all are doing is wonderful. The challenge is that the folks who look at it have a certain lens. So when they start thinking about the giving, it still gets blocked for somehow. And I like, you know, Will or I, you can talk a little bit about it, but now we're in this time where Black is the new thing for a minute. And so the symbolism that I see might bring some investment, but will it bring substance that bring you the real dollars that you deserve, because this is such important work? And I'll stop there.
Yeah, I appreciate you raising that, Daryl. I mean, we have raised more money than we typically raise. But I think if you put us in comparison, like the quality of people that work for Village of Wisdom, Aya told you about her resume. Like, you know, she's not an anomaly on our staff. I'll just put it like that, right? So are we getting the money that I think white leaders are getting? No, absolutely not. And what that investment looks like, you know, I don't know, Daryl. Like, I think the best that we can do is continue to tell our story. And I think from the early on, I ran into a lot of people who were like, well, nobody's going to give you money for that. Nobody's going to invest in Black people. And you can't talk about the work like that. And the thing that I've said, and I may have never heard me say this before, but like, I was put here, I believe I was put here, God put me here to tell the truth. And most people who know me know that at the end of the day, you back me into a corner, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna tell you the truth. And the truth is that we deserve this. We deserve every penny and more. And if you think about the history of where we've been and what our people have been through, and you think that giving us $50 this year because you saw some Black man or Black woman being shot down in the streets was enough to atone for your sins, then you're sorely mistaken, right? There has been 400 years of disinvestment in our people and exploitation of our gifts, our skills, and our talents. At the very least, we should experience 400 years of equal investment into us. And so we're just getting started.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Daryl, for asking that question. Before I move on to the last set of questions, one thing I did want to share, you know, United Way has been on an equity journey for the last couple of years, but we are being very intentional about how we're shifting as a funding organization, our approach to funding, recognizing the inequities that exist in the nonprofit world between organizations led by white individuals versus, you know, those led by people of color, those led by women. So we will continue to share more about that journey that we're on our website, down to even a timeline of exact events. So if you guys do ever want to, if you're ever interested in, you know, how United Way is continuing to pivot to focus on equity and justice, please don't hesitate to look at our website or to reach out directly. I'm going to bundle these last 2 questions because I think it makes sense to do so. Once I can find it on here, we've got a lot of comments. I love this. So one is, can Village of Wisdom's affirmative environment rating scale, is it scalable to schools, and is it available like at the school-wide level, and is it available for schools to use? But then also, how can organizations support your work above and beyond funding. For example, like, do you need help distributing these digital toolkits, bringing awareness? Michelle says she is blown away by the work you're doing and would love to help support it in whatever way possible.
Yeah, so the Culturally Affirming Climate Survey will be available. We'll probably do a small pilot of schools in the beginning of 2021. So we've been moving it to a digital platform so that we can kind of handle doing a lot of schools at once. So yes, it should very soon be scalable. Initially, we'll probably only, handle about 5 to 10 schools because we want to make sure that the environment is safe. But after that, it'll be, we'll take the cap of the number off. So definitely keep an eye out for that from us and communication from us on that. The other thing I was going to say is that we're also trying to develop it so that it can go down to 3rd grade. Right now, it is from 7th to 12th grade, so 7th and 12th grade up. I mean, and absolutely, we're literally kind of working on our communication strategy for this year and to get these toolkits out. And so hopefully soon y'all will see information coming from us about like the toolkits and where to get them from. And so when y'all see that information, if you could retweet it, if you could send emails out, if you could send it to the superintendents or the equity directors or the teachers or the principals or whoever, like if you see our stuff and you think it's valuable, send it to teachers, send it to parents, send it to principals, send it to decision makers inside of these school districts. And that'll definitely help our work get there, because the more y'all mention our stuff to those school leaders, like superintendents and principals, the more it is that those people reach out to us and ask us for our help.
I just want to thank you guys so much. Thank you, Will. Thank you, Aya. Thank you to everybody who joined us today. I was blown away by this conversation. I hope you got as much out of it as I personally did. If anybody's looking to share this conversation with their own colleagues, friends, moms, whomever, it will be saved on our Facebook page at UW Triangle. Right after this, we'll also upload it to YouTube in the next week or so. So keep an eye out for that. And thank you. I hope everybody has a safe Labor Day weekend.
Yeah. Thank y'all so much, United Way, for putting this on and allowing us the time to share with everybody. Thank y'all so much for the folks who joined to come in and listen to us. We really appreciate the time and y'all's listening ear. And thank you, Aya, for showing up, even though I didn't give you the best background on what today was. I really appreciate you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Aya.
Thank you, Bill. Thanks, Village of Wisdom.